Franklin, thank you so much for taking the time, staying up late. People, what do we think of the film? This
Thank
is
you, guys. Thank you.
such a beautiful film, such a work of art, and so fun to talk to the writer, director, and the actor there, Garrett, or whatever your name was. Garrett, I just watched it. I'm sorry. Yeah. So great to have you here. Thanks for staying up late with us.
Thank you. Thank you guys so much for watching. I really appreciate it. And thank you for having me.
Right. It was really great to hear their reactions, their gasps and their laughs and we did cut out their computer crash, and suddenly everyone was like, ah. It was right when in the opening scene when the stakes were just so high, and suddenly everyone's like this. Anyway, so welcome, and I'm going to ask a few questions, and then I will turn it over to the crowd here. People are queuing up here to ask your questions. I would just love to ask a little bit about production, because you have this incredible film, this incredible script that takes place really in like 3 rooms, more or less. And I'd love to know like how many days and what was production like, and how you made it all work.
Sure thing. So I guess the sort of story behind it is that COVID-19 hit, and I think it was in the early spring, I think around in March, when the idea kind of struck of like, hey, this is an idea it's interesting, it's complex, it's something that I'm very passionate about. I didn't know anything about AI at the time. I just thought robots would be a fun way to explore childhood trauma. But to me, it was like this is a story you could tell in like 3 rooms, with like 3 or 4 characters. So it kind of seemed ideal for a first feature film. My team and I had made several short films before this, but this was still very ambitious for us doing this film. And so we looked at the script. My director of photography and I looked at the script and said, well, it would probably cost about $100,000 to make this thing, which we don't have, but we could maybe scrounge up $10,000 and shoot the entire first act. That the first act alone, because there's hardly any set decoration, it's and if myself and my
There's a
DP.
ladder. There's a ladder.
There's a ladder, right? A ladder and a TV, the cheapest TV we could find at Walmart. But aside from that, like if I took a deferred payment and my DP took a deferred payment, we could pay everybody else on the crew and cast what they deserved, and shoot the first act. And then what we would do is we would take that first act and edit it together, and it exists just as you saw it. And then what I did was I sent that to a producer that I knew kind of from the festival circuit with my short films. His name was Peter Kaplowski. And I said, hey, we've shot half a movie. If you know anybody that could give us the other 90,000, we'd love to finish this. And he was like, oh, I got this. And was gracious enough to get us in touch with our producers. So Act 1 was 5 days on set with, I want to say like, you had us 4 actors, and then a crew of like 3 or 4, depending on the day. It was tiny, and we were all in this room. We were all masked up and social distancing. It was about as low-fi, low budget as you could possibly get. And even when we shot, so 5 days on Act 1, 5 days on Act 2, and then 5 days on Act 3. And even still with Act 3, like with Lance there, which was great. We had some more COVID officials and people, but still it was like a team of like 11 crew. It was tiny. And so yeah, I hope that this film, I hope this film empowers other young filmmakers to just go out and try to tell their stories, because I really don't think you need all that much to do it. If you have the passion, the commitment, and the support system that I was lucky enough to have with my incredible team, you can tell some great stories.
Well, it was so great to see a really intelligent, sci-fi, engaging film with so much dialogue, you know, all work in the room and be so compelling. The, um, the, 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 I clocked it at 40 minutes, that first opening scene. Is that about right?
That's right. 40 minutes of straight dialogue.
In one, in one room. Yeah.
Did I hear someone correctly shout, that's not a bad thing?
Yes, you did. Yes, you did. You'll meet him soon enough. Don't worry
Right, right. No, I'm a
about
big fan of a lot of dialogue films like 12 Angry Men, and sci-fi films that do that as well. Primer is a big inspiration for me, as well as Vast of Night, which came out more recently. So when you sit down and write something like that, you kind of have to think, well, I know that this is all I can afford to do. So how do I make that interesting? How do I make that compelling? And that was a big challenge for us.
It's amazing. I'm going to ask my second question is about your cast. It's a brilliant cast all over, but I really want to find out about your actor who played Cherry and finding her and working with her because she's mind-blowingly amazing.
But she's incredible, and once again, I felt so lucky to so everybody in the cast, aside from Lance Henriksen in the third act, everybody else I was good friends with. I had already worked with on several other projects with all three of them, oftentimes together, and we had done a bunch of films together, short films, as well as some stage productions. In fact, the way that I met Tatum Matthews, who plays Cherry, I was directing a stage play called Wait Until Dark. If you haven't heard of it, highly recommend. It's based off of Frederick Knott play. The film adaptation stars Audrey Hepburn and Alan Arkin. It's great. But there's this little girl character that isn't like super, deep. She's just kind of there to show up and be annoying and then like provide a little bit of help to the plot. But Tatum came in on audition. At the time she was like 8 when this play was happening. And she came in and gave this audition where she does this monologue about her dog dying. And like you can imagine me and the other people at the table just like in tears as this little girl is just pulling this monologue out of thin air. And we were like, all right, like the part is yours. But in the back of my mind, I was like, okay, like I've got to figure out what the next thing is with her. And it just so happened when this idea came out, like came to me, it was like, well, I know the uh perfect actress for this role. And I was so fortunate that not only did Tatum sort of meet the expectations that were already very high for her, but she, I mean, just vaulted them completely in such an amazing way. She was so well prepared, did so much research, and really just found so much in the character of Cherry that I never could have. So I'm very, very grateful for her being a part of this project, and we still collaborate on projects today. She's already writing and directing her own stuff, which I'm very stoked about, and hopefully that stuff will get some traction soon. But I mean, she's terrific, and I'm sure she's going to end up in like big franchises and Marvel movies and stuff soon. But in the meantime, like I'm just glad I met her first. But it was a great opportunity to get to work with her.
Fantastic. Okay, I'm going to turn these folks over to you. I mean, and I mean, there's some people lined up here. Some more people might come down. We'll go until you're ready to stop, or until they're ready to stop. So
I've got a glass of cranberry juice. I'm good for the rest of the night. You guys go for it.
perfect. Thanks for clarifying what that is.
Yeah. What is that red liquid? Hello.
Hi. My name's Tyler Valor. I'm a cinematographer. I'm a senior here at UVU. My question is, and I love the movie, by the way, it was really good. My question is like, how did you transition from like short films to like a feature film? What kind of struggles did you have, and like what advice would you have for like students that want to make that transition?
That's a great question, and I wish I had like a really concise answer. Yeah, I mean, I had been doing shorts for almost 10 years. I think taking the leap into doing features it's daunting. It's a big challenge. Um, at the same time, I do think it's an important step to take in your in your journey as a filmmaker. I would say the biggest thing is just making sure that you are going in with as much pre-production planning as possible. I think that was a big saving grace for us with this project. knowing, you know, what was at stake. And this was the first time it wasn't just like, we're going to make this film. And if it lands, great. If it doesn't, no big deal. You know, now we had investors and producers and a lot of people that were kind of counting on us to deliver something that wasn't just going to be like, that we were going to be happy with, but that was also going to meet a demand, that was going to, you know, get the feedback that the producers were hoping for. So I think a big part of it is open communication, making sure that you are very clear and upfront with your vision, that you can communicate that vision to everybody in your crew, including your producers and your financiers. But also, I think the pre-production planning, it was essential for us. The only reason we were able to shoot all of Act One, which like was 40 minutes, in 5 days, was because we knew exactly how we wanted to shoot it, what kind of coverage we wanted to be specific about getting. We had like no extra coverage. Every shot, we kind of knew this is how it's going to fit into the scene. And part of that was also because I knew I was going to be editing it. I kind of pre-edited the film before we started shooting. So I mean, if you're in the indie space doing shorts and you want to make the transition to features, I think you're definitely in a better place than if you were to jump into features without doing shorts. In a lot of ways, I think the best way to get a feature made is to shoot a proof of concept type of video. You don't have to make it 40 minutes like we did. That might have been a little too much. But absolutely, like, find a bit of your feature idea that could work on its own as a short film, package it as a proof of concept, send that out to producers. And if it doesn't end up, you know, getting you the financing that you need, then you can still release it as a short film and network at the festivals. So I hope that's helpful information, or I hope that answers your question. But that's a great question, though.
Thank you. Nice meeting you.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
What, going to stop me, Duane?
No, I'm not going to stop you. You're free reign.
Oh, do I now? No, I'm Isaiah Razor. I am a junior, if I'm correct. I honestly have no idea. I'm in the script writing program, but honestly, I'd rather be a voice actor and actor, which leads into my question, because I saw you acting up there. Like what would be your advice for someone who wants to do the same as you did? Because I've spoken with a few of my friends and they've said it's not the best idea to do that, and yet I really want to do it because like voice actors and stuff gave me a really good childhood, and I want to, you know, do what they did, you know.
Yeah, no, it is a great mistake to make on your first film. I'll say that. I don't think I'll ever do it again. I no, but I'm, like I said though, like, I don't want to discourage you from trying it, because I think it is, first of all, for me, it was like a great way to save money on the budget. It was one less actor I had to pay, and one less person I had to, you know, communicate my vision to. But I think, like I said, I don't intend on ever doing it again. But there were 3 reasons why I wasn't like completely upset with how it turned out. I think the reason why it worked for this project, and it boils down to three big things, and these are my recommendations for you if this is something you want to do. Number one, I was lucky enough to have a great pre-established relationship with my director of photography. We had worked on so many projects together, and I was able to trust him, kind of implicitly, that when I had an idea, I knew that he also would share that, and that if I needed to divert my attention to sort of acting in the scene, that he was there to still carry my vision into the cinematography side. And so that was thing number one. Thing number two was trust in my fellow actors. I had worked with them on numerous occasions before, and in several of those instances, I had acted with them. I think I had acted with every single one of those actors in some other project that wasn't even my own. I had acted alongside David Gerard, who plays Amos, in stage plays. I had acted with Tatum Matthews in someone else's short film, and same thing with Cinda, working with her both on stage and screen. So because of that, I felt that I was still able to direct their performances within the scene, and also trust that if I needed help and if I needed honest feedback on what I was doing, I could count on them to be honest and communicate with me. We just clicked so well as a family. We had been Zooming during COVID like the entire time, like 3 days a week. So we just really felt like a really tight family. So that's number two. And number three, I'm going to be a broken record here. No pun intended. I'm realizing that's related to the film, but
I love jokes, so go ahead.
but I think the most important thing is, once again, pre-production planning. For me with this film, it was essential that we knew what every shot was gonna look like, how it was gonna fit into the edit. We knew exactly how our days were gonna be scheduled out. That, I think, spending so much time to a neurotically meticulous degree is one of the reasons why I felt comfortable acting in front of the camera at the same time as directing. Those are my three recommendations. I hope that was helpful.
Honestly, are you sure I'm not an AI? Because respectfully, I had a ghost of those same ideas before.
Good.
I'm
Good.
also the guy who said dialogue is okay, by the way. And
Great. Well, thank you.
I'll just finish and say, I need to be unleashed. So I ain't you, but I need to be unleashed. So thanks.
Well, excellent. Thank you so much. Best of luck to you and your projects. I'm sure I'm going to hear your voice in lots of films in the future.
I hope so.
I hope so too. Great to meet you, man. Thank you so much.
Oh,
I got you. Camera department. Jib up.
there we go.
Here we go. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Gabriel Castaneda. I'm planning to do like the directing track, but like also like with a big emphasis on like writing. And I just wanted to say I really enjoyed the movie. Like I really enjoyed what it was trying to do, and I did get the vibes of like Primer and Vast of Midnight from it, like which I really enjoyed those. But and yeah, I also really appreciate how you are so like personally invested, like you're writing, directing, and starring in it. And I really appreciate that aspect of filmmaking. I think that that is going to be a lot more popular in the future, as more people are going to do that. And I just wanted to ask, like, when you're so personally attached to like a project, have you ever like started to like doubt yourself, or like kind of like have second thoughts? Because that's a big problem I have with a lot of my projects. So yeah.
Am I allowed to swear? Is that okay?
Swear away.
Is that okay? Every fucking day. The self-doubt, the imposter syndrome, I've had to learn to live with it. I thought eventually it would go away. You know, like, well, once the film is done with production, it'll stop and I'll feel comfortable. I'll feel like, okay, I did a good job. And then that didn't happen. And it was like, well, once the film like has its world premiere, then it'll stop. And once it gets like good reviews, no, it just kept going. Okay, well, once the film like gets, once the film gets nominated for an Indie Spirit Award, then I'll relax. But it just doesn't stop. So I think that's a very important and something that I think a lot of young filmmakers should know, is that that's a natural, completely natural feeling to have. That self-doubt, that you want to be close enough to your project, that you care enough about it, that you want to pursue, like any possible feedback that you could get about it, right? And not that you have to necessarily agree with that feedback, but at the very least, the fact that you care enough about this project, that it's your baby, enough that you want it to be better than what you could imagine yourself doing. I think that's a totally normal, and I think it's ultimately a positive thing. So yeah, if that self-doubt creeps in, just kind of, instead of letting it like make you feel inferior or make you feel like bad about what you've done, or sad that you could have done more, but maybe you weren't able to, you got to kind of like just take a breath and let that motivate you to try and pursue the next thing. You know, keep learning from your mistakes, keep improving. That's what I'm trying to do. And it's weird that I'm like saying all that, like I'm giving advice, but I still haven't quite like figured that out myself. Like I'm kind of a blind leading the blind kind of thing here. But I do think that it's a very wise question that you've asked. And I wish I had like a real, you know, kind of Obi-Wan Kenobi answer, but I don't. It's just, you know, keep going. That doubt is natural.
Right. Thank you.
Thank you. That was a great question. Oh, we're getting deep. We're getting deep tonight.
Yeah, we're mining.
Hello.
My name's Rachel. I am a senior at UVU. I'm in the directing track, but I'm also a writer. My question is, like, what was your process like in trying to make a very dialogue heavy movie so interesting in the like final?
Great question. Thank you for asking. So yeah, that's like the big challenge at first, right? When you sit down with the blank page and you're like, okay, this, I know I can only afford to do dialogue. How do I make it interesting? For me, I kind of felt like I discovered like a cheat, I guess you would call it, or like a hack, which was that when I started writing, I put a mystery on page 1, and then a secret, and then I told like a secret on page 2, and then another mystery on page 3, and then another secret on page 4, and I would just keep alternating every page. And if you watch the film, those first 15 minutes, you'll see every minute that passes, there's a new mystery that's set up, and then a different secret is like revealed, and then a new mystery is set up, and I just kind of alternated back and forth. I had also spent a lot of time watching interrogation videos in preparation for writing this, and that was, I think, really insightful and inspiring. What I loved doing was watching a real live interrogation video, without knowing any of the context as to what this suspect did and how much the police know, how much does he think they know, right? When you go in completely blind watching a video like that, you as an audience member are kind of playing detective yourself. You're like a fly on the wall that's trying to figure out, okay, what do the police know about him? What did he do? Do they know that for certain? What is he hiding from them, right? And I just thought that was super interesting and engaging. So I approached the story from that kind of perspective, just like how, you know, if you were just dropped into this room and you don't know who Gareth is, you don't know why these people have brought him in, but slowly you're picking up all these little pieces. And at first, some of them don't seem to be super important. Like when he talks about working on CGI faces for Star Wars movies, like it doesn't seem important until later on, and then it feels like a big payoff, that the secret you were told on page 3 is now paying off on page 30. So I think if you're writing a lot of heavy dialogue, keep the momentum, keep you know, the pace at which you reveal information and tease information, I think has to be kind of consistent. And I don't know. I think I wish I had. Again, I'm going to say this on like every question that's asked. But it's like I wish I had like a professional answer to that. But the truth is, like that's sort of the cheat code that I figured out with this film, was just try to keep the pace of that information consistent.
Oh, that's awesome. Thanks.
Thank you so much. These are great questions.
Hi, Franklin. My
Hello.
name is Brandon. I am an editor and I'm a senior. So as I've been watching, you know, various projects that you've made, one thing that I've noticed is you have a knack for knowing when to hold on a shot and not cut away, which is really important in editing, obviously. So my question is, are those kind of decisions things that you decide on early on? Like, do you write those, or are those things that you decide while you're editing, and kind of what goes into those decisions?
Absolutely. I'm so glad I'm talking to an editor. I feel like it's sort of like when you meet someone that speaks a secret language that only like the two of you know. It's like, okay, cool. Yeah, we can talk about Premiere Pro all day. So that's a great question. I feel like the editing process for me happens in pre-production as well as post-production. And so that's a really good question. Like, how do you know if you're going to hold on something? I think it's a little bit split. I would like to sit here and be like, oh yeah, I know when I'm going to hold. I know from the get-go, like when I write a line or write a couple of lines and plan out a shot, I know that that's a shot I'm not going to cut away from. But the truth is, like, filmmaking is all about, especially with indie filmmaking, it's all about knowing exactly what you want, and having a complete, concise, clear vision without any deviation whatsoever. And then also be completely open to like throwing it out the window because it sucks and it doesn't work the way that you thought it would, right? And so you like for I'm trying to think of like a good example of this in the film. There's a bit where there's a bit where Gareth is alone. It's in the first act where the agents leave and Gareth is sitting there at the table, right? And the shot like kind of stays after they've left, right? And we know that Cherry is behind the camera, right? And it would feel as though it would make sense to cut to her having like a bit of a change in sort of expression or something before she says her first line. But for me, when I was sort of picturing it, I kind of like knew that I didn't want to show Cherry in that moment. I wanted like us to linger on Gareth and kind of wonder what was going to happen next so that when when the audience hears her line, suddenly the audience is like, oh shit, she's smarter than we knew, like that than we anticipated, right? So that's a good example of like on the page, I felt very confident that that was a shot I was going to hold on. But I know for a fact there are other shots where I had no clue that I was going to hold. I'm trying to think of a good example, but I can't. But one's not coming to mind. But I guarantee you there were where I would have the reverse angle because I would assume that I was going to cut to it at a certain point, and then find out like, oh wait, once I edit this together, it doesn't quite work here. It actually works better if I hold on the shot longer before I cut to the reverse. One that took me by surprise. It's the first time that we get the looking into the camera POV shots in Act 1, where I think it's Dina says, "Do you go on chat rooms?" And then it cuts to it's supposed to cut to Garrett's face and then back to Dina and then over to Amos, right? Because in my mind it was like I'm gonna follow the eyes, but when I cut that together, it didn't feel right. It didn't flow right, and it's one of those things where it's like practically like this on paper, it would make sense that the editing would work this way. But it just doesn't feel right. It actually feels better if you break up the eye line and instead cut to Amos first in the POV, then to Dina, then back to Gareth. And it was weird and like I didn't understand why it worked because like every like rule in editing would go against that, but it just worked better in the context of what was happening in the scene. So I would say it's a pretty even split once you kind of boil it all down. It's good to know exactly how you want to do it, and it's good. I think it's a healthy thing for young filmmakers to try to let shots linger, because so much modern editing is too fast. I feel, but also be open to being wrong. Like it's a part of the process.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Hey, my name is Alec Packham. I'm also an editor and I'm a junior. I'll try to work camera here. So my question is also going to be about editing. So with dialogue, I think you paced the rhythm of the dialogue super well. And so I was just wondering how you went about shooting that pacing and then in the post, how you pace that.
Thank you. Yeah. First of all, thank you. Second of all, I need to mention when it came to pacing the dialogue, a lot of that is owed to our rehearsal time. Because it was COVID and because we were kind of socially starved. And when we started rehearsals, it was in the summer of 2020. We shot in the fall of 2020. So for like 3 months straight, we would just hop on Zoom. It would be the four of us, David, Cinda, Tatum, and myself. We would just hop on Zoom together and have a quick little like social catch up. Like, well, what are you up to? Nothing. Yeah, stuck in the house still. And then we would just run through the lines, and it was like so. I don't know. It was like almost meditative in a way. And through that process, through the rehearsal process, we kind of like found that pace and that rhythm. And again, being in my head, like at this time, also figuring out what shots I wanted to get, figuring out how we were going to to shoot out the day, what kind of coverage I wanted, finding that pacing in the rehearsal and finding it in sort of real time, since the film mostly takes place in real time, that was incredibly helpful from a production perspective. It also, going back to the long takes thing, sort of kind of it would benefit us to get long takes, because then we could let the dialogue kind of unfold naturally in the pace that we had rehearsed it in, rather than try and like chop it up into different pieces of coverage and shots and reverse shots. And like I said before, that carried over into editing, because we had shot it in a very specific kind of way. In the editing room, it pieced together just as it was kind of planned. Yeah, did I answer the question, or can you repeat the question actually, just so that I'm making sure I'm covering it?
Yeah, I think you covered it well. It was just
Okay.
pacing on shooting and then editing. So
Yeah. When it comes to editing with pacing, I am sort of in the belief that, it's partially math. It is partially like a kind of, there is a technical side to it, but it's at least half, if not more predominantly, a feeling. It's an emotional sort of practice. When you edit and you watch it back, you have to feel it, and you have to determine, does this feel right? Does it feel too slow? Does it feel too fast? Is the pacing changing? I think that's another big thing. I know a lot of films that are just like boom, 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 like all the way through. And there's a time and a place for that. If you're editing The Bear, obviously, like you gotta have like stuff is going like at light speed. But even The Bear knows like when to hold off and to have a scene where everything kind of slows, right? You've got to give the audience some ebb and flow and some variation. Otherwise, they'll get either bored or worn out. So yeah, with editing, I do think a lot of it is feeling the cut, feeling the pacing in your bones. Yeah, again, another non-professional answer. Just feel it out. But thank you. That's a great question, though.
thank you. I appreciate it. Great film, by the way.
Thank you so much.
Hello.
Hello.
My name is Kiara. I'm a freshman and I'm hoping to go into the cinematography track and do something in writing.
Sweet.
So my question is, what was your inspiration, purpose, and reason for this movie?
Oh, wow. Okay, yeah. First of all, thank you. I love your hair, by the way. That's
Oh, thank you.
rad. So I had read numerous articles prior to 2020 about how there were these nonprofit organizations that were using like a CGI model to hunt down online predators. And I just thought that was the coolest thing I'd ever heard. Like, that's just like, what a great way to use technology for good. And it's something that I care very much about, is the health and safety of children, and child trafficking. It's something that's very important to me personally. And so when I heard about that, I just thought, that's so cool. I wonder what kinds of conversations were these developers having behind closed doors. And wouldn't it be cool to kind of see what that was? But the idea didn't really like stick with me until about 2020, like the spring of 2020, when kind of going over some of these loose ideas, the AI hunting, the AI like predator hunter idea kind of came back, and suddenly I just remember kind of imagining that there could be a like thematic parallel between the budding adolescence of AI and childhood trauma. And for some reason, once that kind of line was drawn in my head, then I felt like it all just kind of made sense. And it was like, okay, this is a story I need to tell. And yeah, I think for me, I wanted to explore, there's a lot that I wanted to explore about processing child trauma and the right way to do it, the wrong way to do it. And to me, I also wanted it to have an interesting science fiction kind of hook with the whole sort of having an AI robot be, the sort of focus. But I had no idea like how AI worked. I wasn't really all that interested in it, to be honest, back then. But I was like, well, if I'm going to write this thing, I should probably learn about it. So I took like a 2-week online course about machine learning and talked to a bunch of professionals in that industry. And it was weird because this was like 2020. So everybody that I was talking to that was working in fields of AI and machine learning, they were all like, oh yeah, AI is about to have a big boom. Like everybody's going to be talking about AI soon. And I was like, okay, yeah, I'm sure you feel that way because you're in the middle of working on this stuff. But like, I don't think it's going to be like that. And then sure enough, by the time the film gets released in 2023, it was like the biggest topic at South by Southwest. And so everybody was coming to see the movie because of that. And I was sort of realizing like our film might be antiquated by now. Like it's actually, I was worried that the film would be too futurist and seem too like crazy that we'd have robots walking around. And now it's like that's what's happening. So it was kind of weird, but yeah, for me though, like the what's important to me about the film is not the AI stuff. For me, it's the ethics, and especially revolving around what it means to be a child, what it means to have trauma, and how trauma is often a cycle passed down by parental figures. And even when we try to do the right thing, even with the best intentions, if we don't do it the right way, we end up hurting the people that we love. So yeah, that's what I'm going to say about that. It's once again, a wonderful and wise question. I hope I answered that okay.
Yeah, you did. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Hey.
Hello.
Let's see.
Yeah, see, in film, we call that a tilt, right? Right.
All right. So I'm Michael Langton. I'm kind of undecided on whether I want to go into directing or editing. And my question kind of, I feel, oversteps the same territory. So if that's, I don't know. Anyway, basically, kind of like you said, in the midst of you developing this idea, it was like, prime COVID-19 era.
Mhm.
Which I found interesting in your film when you alluded to Rogue One's representation of Grand Moff Tarkin and like that visual effect, because at the time I feel like that was the main discussion that people were having was in broad circles in the general public, that was like the main thing that introduced people to like deepfake technology and such. And since then, we've seen like other Star Wars projects, Ghostbusters has done it. And so in the time since then, and even during the time that you were filming the movie, like I don't even think ChatGPT became a thing until later 2022. With that much, I guess, conversation that developed in the time between, when you were making your film and crafting it and when it came out to film festivals, In sorry, I'm just trying to figure out how to word this.
No worries.
I guess just in the scope of AI and just in general, my question really comes down to just when you finished your product, how much regret or longing is there for like, oh, I wish I brought this to the conversation. I wish I'd brought that to the table. You know, like, damn, I wish I would have mentioned that, especially, you know, in the context of AI, which was a growing industry and what this decade is heavily revolved around.
Absolutely. This is a great question, and one that I'm very excited to answer, because there's a couple things, you know, like I think definitely my perspective on what AI is now is very different from how I started on this project. Initially, my whole thing was sort of this very, you know, Roddenberry, you know, idealist Star Trek kind of thing of like, but you know, if let's say this hypothetical AI was created to do something really altruistic and wonderful and save children, and it was like the purest form of an AI origin story, like what are the ethical implications behind the best case scenario? But now I'm like, yeah, I think it's kind of terrifying where we are right now with AI. And of course, like I do think that this is still consistent with what the film is saying and what's happening with AI today. I think the film does sort of make it clear that or at least what I feel is that AI will always be a reflection of the people who control it, of who make it, right? So if it's made for the purpose of doing something good and altruistic, it's going to continue to do good and altruistic things. Now, if it's built for the purposes of you know, invading people's privacy, if it's made for the purposes of dare I say capitalist, you know, reasons, it's going to spiral into doing that kind of stuff. If it's built for nefarious purposes, like it's not going to, we don't need to have a debate over whether or not we're hurting its feelings. If it's just made to, you know, do awful things with people's private information and stuff. But I do think it is still, you know, AI is going to be a reflection of the people that develop it. In the same way that children are in many ways a reflection of the people that raise them, right? It's another parallel between AI and children. But no, it was so weird to like move this to a lighter like kind of topic is that it was really weird going through this whole process because it took us a long time to make this film. I mean, production was spread out like 6 months apart between each act. Yeah. So we shot Act 1 in the fall of 2020, shot Act 2 in the spring of 2021, and then Act 3 in the fall of 2021. There's a lot of reasons why, but but to like put it into perspective, then like, you know, coming up with the idea and writing it in 2020, and then when we're wrapping production in the fall of 2021, and I remember when the trailer for Megan came out, or as some people know it as Mathregan, and I remember seeing the trailer come out with some of the crew, and I was just like, oh no, like, oh God, like it's a little girl robot and she dances, and oh no, and she's blonde, like this is but of course like that movie turned out to be completely different. It was a totally different tone and a totally different type of film, and I love that film and for many reasons, but yeah, so like stuff like that felt like a low, but then you also had these moments like when the news came out that the one of the AI programmers at Google like was fired because he was like coming out and being like, this AI thing I helped make is sentient and needs rights or whatever, and then like Google fired him, and I remember being like, oh my God, that's what happens to Amos, like this is crazy, it's happening in real life, we got to get this movie done before the rest of it happens for real. So you have highs and lows like that, but at the end of the day, yeah, I think I just don't know like what to anticipate with AI. I'll never make another movie about AI again, that's for sure. Like I don't want to pretend to speculate what the future of AI really is going to look like, but for our purposes, for this story, it was, you know, a very idealist these people built an AI to save children, and then the story goes from there. But I hope that answers your question.
No, that was perfect.
Good. Okay.
Questions, especially
Thank
the
you.
Regan bit. Nah, I appreciate that. Thanks.
No worries, no worries.
See ya.
Thank you so much. I'm sure we're gonna get a lot more like scary. I mean, that's always been the case, right? With films about AI, it's always like the AI turns evil, the AI kind of turns against us. And I just was kind of tired of that and thought it'd be interesting if turns out we were the bad guys. But anyways, thank you guys.
I'm Sam. I'm actually not a film student. I'm a biotech student. I just really like film.
Oh my God. Is that even allowed? Is he allowed to be here? Thank you so much.
Yeah, my question is kind of revolving around production costs for the film. Just with a film like this, where like the sets were minimal, you know, you directed it, you acted in it, you did some of the editing, like you were saying. What were some of the biggest expenses in the budget? And were there like any unforeseen expenses that popped up that were kind of unavoidable? How did that look?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, our budget for this film was pretty simple, just because most of it just went to the cast and crew. It was mostly just going to people. We had a little bit of money spent on production design for Act 2, and then we spent a little bit of money just for the Act 3 location, just kind of in good faith because we were going to have a lot of people running around this very nice Frank Lloyd Wright replica house. So and I think, I think honestly the biggest splurge for us was Lance, getting Lance there. We only had him for 2 days, but still like worth every penny because he's insane and he just absolutely killed it in the role. But I will share a quick little story about, I think, one of the strangest expenses was we had originally sort of set aside quite a bit of money for a super fancy, futuristic, specialty made wheelchair that was going to be like really like slick and futuristic. And it was designed and it was like meant to like arrive the day before we shoot because it was going to take so long to make and then but on the day like before we're supposed to shoot and we're like trying to figure out where's the wheelchair, it should be arriving, today, and we get an email from the company that's supposed to build this thing saying, hey, we couldn't meet your order, so we're going to send you a refund in a month. And it's again one of those classic moments on any film set where you're just like, all right, I guess we just shut it all down then, right? But because you're a filmmaker and you're a little bit insane, you say, okay, let's work the problem. Let's try and figure out a creative solution. Let's perceive this obstacle as an opportunity for creativity. And so in my mind, I was like, all right, we don't want a wheelchair that looks like it's from 2020. We want something that's either ancient, right? Like that's super old, or super, super fancy. But at this point, preferably something super old because you can't rely on finding a super fancy wheelchair. So let's find something that's like wooden if we can, right? And it just so happens that Tatum Matthews, the girl who plays Cherry, her grandmother had an old shed in her backyard full of a bunch of junk that no one had looked into for like 20 years, right? And she said, well, there's some junk in there. I could check and see if there's a wheelchair in there. Meanwhile, we're like making phone calls to every like hospital or museum, like in like a 50-mile radius. And she, sure enough, opens up the shed and there's this old rickety wheelchair. And so I have to like get, someone in my family to drive out to pick it up and then drive another hour back to set. And we unload it off of the car and it's like falling apart. But luckily the person who lived in the house that we were shooting Act 3 in, her neighbor was a welder and he was like, I can fix this. So he's like putting the thing back together and we're like scrambling because Lance is about to arrive, right? Until finally like it's all set and Lance gets to set and I had been like hyping up this fancy wheelchair for him. And now it's like this wooden piece of junk, and he gets to it and he's like, you know, what is this? It looks like it's gonna kill me if I sit in it. And it's one of those, again, one of those moments on a film set where you just kind of have to like put one train track in front of the other as the train is like moving over it. And I just remember like totally bullshitting and just being like, well, when you think about it, Lance, you know, Gareth probably doesn't trust any technology that he didn't build. And then suddenly Lance was like, oh, yeah, yeah. And he sits in it and he's like, this is great. This is going to be great. And sure enough, like when we shot it, I couldn't imagine it any other way. I'm so glad that we ended up with the wooden wheelchair, because the wood ends up matching the tables and the rest of the aesthetic of the house. Like it feels like it was always meant to be. And I wish I could take like credit for that. But the truth is, like, it's one of those things where an accident or a fuck up will happen, and you just have to say, how do we shift? How do we pivot? How do we use this obstacle as an opportunity? So that was where like a big chunk of our budget like was sort of lost to us, but ended up being good for the producers because we got it back. So yeah, I hope that's a fun anecdote. But the truth is, most of the budget went to personnel, and just to all of the hardworking people involved in this project.
Gotcha. Really cool. Yeah, I got to say the wheelchair, that's something that actually stood out to me. I really actually liked it. I thought it was like a really good contrast to the super futuristic AI with the wires and things, and I really liked it. So it seems super intentional to me. That's cool to know the backstory behind it.
Thank you. Yeah, it's, you know, I'm always tempted to be like, yeah, I'm a genius. I planned that. That was, yeah, the contrast of the old and the new, absolutely. But no, it's that's just filmmaking though. And I hope someday you know, you get yourself on a set. I know it's not your what your focus is, but it's a really awesome experience if you ever get the chance. I highly recommend it.
I would love to. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Hey, Franklin, we've got 3 more questions. That sound okay?
Keep them coming. I'm good.
That cranberry juice flowing.
Oh yeah. I'm just gonna, yeah, it usually takes me 5 hours to finish one cranberry juice. So we're good. We're totally good.
Hey, Franklin, my name is Duane Andersen. I'm a director. First, I just want to say thank you, because I treasure the moments that I get to call my older brother and say, I saw this movie that I think you're really going to like, that you got to watch. So it's going to be cool.
Thank you, man. I appreciate that immensely.
My question for you is like, coming as a director, what was the first project or scene that you shot that you felt like worked on an emotional level? And like, what was the key to making that work for you? Like, you watching your own project felt something.
Wow. That's a, ooh, yeah, okay. Give me a second for that. I did a short film. I don't know if it's still on YouTube. I might have taken it down out of embarrassment. But I did a short film called Chatterbox, and it's about these 2 assassins that convince their targets to commit suicide, which in hindsight, I would never in a million years make a film with that premise. But at the time, I was going through some stuff as a moody 19-year-old. But there's a sequence in that where 2 characters are talking about their experiences with suicide. And obviously it was, for me, like very cathartic to pull my own, to take something that was very intimate and personal to me. It's something that I had never talked about publicly, and putting it into a film. In hindsight, I think it was a little, I don't know. I wouldn't do that. But I do feel as though it felt like a release. Now, I don't think that everybody should make film necessarily their therapy for the sake of therapy. And we get into really tricky territory here, but I do remember feeling a huge catharsis in getting to express something with a story that I couldn't articulate with words. And you know what, actually, I'm gonna because this is kind of a downer, I'm gonna switch to a different one, and I'll try and keep quick. But I did a film called Bedridden, that is about a girl who's kept awake by an ominous voice in her head that tells her that if she tries to leave her bed or touch her phone, that she'll die. And it's a very scary and haunting premise. But as I was writing it, I realized what it was to me, and what the voice represented, and what I was actually trying to communicate. And I had written out the film, and I wanted to get a really good voice actor to do the ominous voice in her head. And I sent it to someone that I had been a big fan of, who has a great YouTube channel. And he had suggested that I change the ending and actually add an extra third to the film that took what I had said and added something more positive to it. And at first I was like, why? Like, this is a dark story and I want to kind of shed light on the reality of the pain that I'm experiencing. But at the same time, I think when I took his advice and wrote the third act and shot it, and now it's in the film as it exists. And I realized how right he was, that when you have this ability to tell stories, yeah, you can tell stories that show the world as it is, but you also have the ability to show what the world could be. You have the ability to not just like project problems, but also propose solutions. And that's something that I felt was very important to me with The Artifice Girl as well. That yes, there is this this pain, and there is this hurt and this problem. But that doesn't mean that it isn't solvable. That doesn't mean that there isn't still the capacity for change. Now, I love good depressing stories. I love good downers with sad endings, right? But what I want more than anything is to try and incite conversation with the audience. To me, that's what filmmaking is all about. It's using behavior and light to incite emotion and discussion. Yeah. I hope that's, again, I feel every answer I'm like, I hope that's okay.
No,
But that's my answer. So thank you for asking. Thanks. Ooh, yeah. This is like good. I should be charging, you guys should be charging me for this therapy. Because this is
we're gonna save you on your bill this month.
Yeah, good. Thank you.
Hi, my name's
Hello?
Nina. I'm in the editing track. And I was wondering what your most challenging edit was.
Okay. Yeah, I actually have a really easy answer for this, which is the punching sequence in The Artifice Girl. It's the bit where Gareth gets punched. And for me, I was so insistent on the film staying hyper realist and super like grounded that I didn't want to try and like Hollywood the punches, and I didn't want to like have any kind of anything weird happen with the music or anything. And I just kept coming at it from different ways in the edit. Like I felt like I had given myself enough coverage, but I still I couldn't make it work. I couldn't make the pacing feel right, where, you've got this very kind of, it's like awkward and silly at first when he first gets punched, but then it gets like kind of unnerving because he's like really punching hard, and then cutting to Cherry's reaction as the punches are happening. And then she cuts him off and says, okay, just stop, right? I was having such a hard time getting because it's like tonal whiplash right there. And it's supposed to end with this moment that's supposed to make the audience go, oh my God, like she's, not, she doesn't sound like an AI anymore in her response. She's like breaking character almost. And it's supposed to be shocking and not goofy. And so it took me forever to just strike the right balance of and using the punches as a metronome, and then also kind of acquiescing to the to the whimsy of pulling the sound kind of out and making sort of putting a low pass on it so it sounds like it's almost distant and like drowned out. and pushing in on Cherry's face, and having the beats still happen, and then also bringing in the piano music was a very a late addition. The piano music just slightly comes in as it's like pushing in on her face, and then she shouts. And when Amos's character turns around, yeah, it was just getting the timing of that was so difficult for me. I still am like not like 100% happy with it, but at least now it feels a lot better than it did on the first cut. That one was tricky to get right. The other one too that I'll just quickly throw out is the last moment of the film. That was a decision that I know not everybody in my kind of close circle knew how they felt initially about the record scratch. And because originally the record scratch wasn't in the script. But it was a decision that I was very, very, you know, insistent about. And
It worked very well because the juxtaposition there, like somebody else said earlier, with like the old tech and the new tech, it just worked very nicely.
I agree. Thank you. I'm glad to hear that. It seems like it's been resonating with people, and it also gives the audience something to chew on afterwards. I know what the record scratch means to me, but it's not something that I want to discourage discussion over. I think it's important that it's a little ambiguous. So yeah, those two moments I think were the hardest to edit in the film. Thank you. That's a great question.
Hello.
Hello.
I'm Joseph. I'm a freshman and uncertain with what I want to do. I kind of like did a lot of stuff in high school. But I'm curious, I know there was a very limited budget. What would you have changed in the pre-production and just like scripting if you knew you had a big budget?
Yeah, so this is an interesting question because I have two sides to this. Like one side is like nothing. I wouldn't want to change anything. I'm happy with the way the film is. I'm happy with its flaws. I'm happy where you can see the fingerprints. Like I like that it's it feels like a low budget film, which it is. It's my first film, and it's always going to be my first film. And there's a lot to be proud of and a lot to look back and say, wow, look what we were able to do with hardly anything. If I was like gifted an extra $300,000, I'm really not sure what I would do with it aside from maybe like a bigger craft services table. Like, no, no, but truly, like, I think maybe I would have spent a little bit more time on the lighting in Act 2. We were a little in over our heads. Act 1 was simple, was a very simple lighting setup, which is why I think it worked and felt consistent the whole time. Act 2, we wanted more complex lighting, but the problem was it was the same room that we shot Act 1 in, which had very little room. So it was really hard to try and get our lights right and consistent and attractive in Act 2. So I don't know. To me, there's also a world where it's like, well, wouldn't maybe the film would be cooler if it was in like a really big, like sprawling basement that looked like I'm trying to think of like a good example of what it could have looked like a dark basement kind of warehouse space that extended into infinity. And so in like Act 1, it's just very empty, like an empty warehouse. And then in Act 2, it was like full of servers and like high tech towers, like technology towers. But then it would lose its like indie charm, like so, and it wouldn't be my baby anymore, like yeah, so I don't know. Yeah, my lazy answer to that is going to be we would have something other than Panera and Popeyes for
Just
arcade.
like better set design.
Yeah.
Like
I
the,
don't know. Like
yeah.
to me, it's like, well, we could have gotten a really fancy chair, but I love the chair as it exists in its flawed state. You know, the flaws make the film great, in my opinion. The hole in the wall that happens from the doorknob, that happened during rehearsal. And at first I like had a panic attack and was like, oh God, we got to go to Home Depot and get like stuff. And then, you know, one of it was our line producer was like, well, I guess there's no way to like work it into the story. And I was like, of course there is. Like, what? Yeah, okay. So like it happens, and then we can turn that into the shot there. And so I don't know, like uh I don't know if I change anything, you know? It's like if someone were to ask you, is there anything you would change about your child? It's like, no. Best for my child. Also, you know, love them the way they are. So yeah. That's what I'm gonna go with. If you get a big chunk of money and it brings you closer to your vision, great. But don't stretch your vision because you have more money. I think if that would be my advice. If this magical hypothetical scenario were to happen to anybody, and instead, I'll tell you what you need to do with that money. And you know what I would have done with? No, I'm not going to get into it. But what I will say, put it into sound mixing. Get a really good sound mix. Get a really good sound mix.
I loved the score in Act 3. I feel like that was a really beautiful addition.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Yeah, we had a great composer, Alex Cuervo, who did the original score. And yeah, I'm very happy with the way that the film sounds. But that was also maybe one of the most stressful parts of production, was getting good sound. Sound is the most important and also the most underappreciated and also the most stressful part of the process, I think. But yeah,
Cool. Thank you so much.
thank you. Thank you.
We have for one more, Franklin?
I'm ready. Let's do it.
It's gonna be a really good one.
Hi, I'm Penny. I'm a junior. I just wanted to say thank you. It's so rare that I see asexuality mentioned on screen, and I thought that was cool. I wanted to ask if you could tell us more about your script writing process. Were you saying that you were like learning about AI while you were writing it, and like when did you feel it was refined enough to shoot?
Good question. And also thank you for mentioning the asexuality thing. I'm glad to see more representation now actually in the past few years than I ever have. So I think that's really cool. But regarding the script writing process, so it always, I don't know, it feels weird to talk about this because I feel like I have to provide a caveat. But so I had the desire to write the script, right? And I think I maybe wrote a page or two and then stopped, like fully stopped, didn't write another word because I was like, I don't know anything about this subject. I need to do some research. I need to know at least how to speak this language. So I took this online course, had a bunch of Zoom meetings. That was about a 2-week process for me. 2-week process where I didn't do any writing, just research, just try to absorb as much as I could. And again, this was all in COVID. So and my room at the time was very, very small. I was practically living in a tiny basement. So I'm just sitting on my bed, taking this online course and having these Zoom calls. And then after those 2 weeks, when I felt confident, like all right, I got it. I sort of didn't sleep and wrote the first draft in approximately 48 hours. Now I know that sounds really cool, and it's like you might be picturing like Jude Law with a typewriter, and it's like super cool and like, wow, what a genius. I need to like set the record straight about this though. Like it was absolutely it was not attractive. It was very disgusting. You have your Grubhub bags littered around your bed, and your mattress is like getting burnt marks from the bottom of your laptop, right? and you haven't showered and you're still wearing the same pajamas that you wore a week ago. And so I wrote the first draft in 48 hours. It felt like literally vomiting the script out. Sorry to be gross about it, but that's just what it felt like. And that draft is very, very similar to the final as it exists in the final film. Now, I will say this gave me a lot of misplaced confidence in my abilities to write screenplays. I thought every screenplay after that point would be that easy to write. And I'm not going to speak much about what I'm working on now, but I will say this most recent script that I've turning into a feature film took me a year and a half to write. So like, I don't want anyone out there to be like, oh man, I gotta start like, writing things really quickly. No, I do not recommend it. It is not like normal, and it's not healthy, and it's also doesn't mean shit. Like your process is going to take as much time as it needs. Sometimes it flows, and sometimes it drips, and doesn't mean that the script is going to be any better or worse because of the length of the process. I think the most important part for me though was after writing that first draft, getting it peer reviewed and getting it read by people that I trusted with feedback, people that I knew would be honest with me, and any changes that were made to the script happened from that first sort of round of feedback, because it was all very specific and concise, and the changes were made, and then draft 2 was like, that's the draft that we shot. But yeah, so that was as far as the broad strokes of the writing process was concerned, that was it. I think it was written pretty chronologically for me. I started with the beginning, got through Act 1, and I want to say, like, by the time I'd finished Act 1, I felt very confident in how I knew I wanted the film to end and how I wanted things to pay off. And I think there were only a few instances of like, okay, because of the line, it's my history, not yours. I want to make sure Gareth says that in Act 1, right? There were only a few instances where it's like I wrote a payoff and then went back to put in the setup. There was another one, and I can't remember what it was. But for the most part, it just kind of like sort of was like solving a jigsaw puzzle at both ends. That's not a thing. But it just felt like it just kind of happened very quickly. And yeah, I'm very grateful for that. I'm glad it didn't take me a year and a half to write Artifice Girl. At the same time, I feel like, it's the only time it'll ever happen for me. Everything since then has been really hard to write, which I don't know if that's good or if that's bad or what, but it's not going to stop me from writing, and it shouldn't stop anybody. If it's taking you years to write your scripts, keep writing. Don't give up.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Well, Franklin, that has been a wonderful night. Looks like we're getting you done just before midnight.
That's right.
You turn into a pumpkin.
Absolutely.
So thank you so much. It was a pleasure meeting you back in Reno and your team that you had out there and hanging out with you out there. And it's been such a pleasure introducing your film to these students. I want to give them another round of applause.
Thank you guys.
Just keep making awesome stuff. We look forward to seeing what's next.
Thank you guys so much, and truly thank you so much, Duane, for this opportunity, and for all of you guys for your incredible questions. Keep making movies, keep sharing your stories, and yeah, thank you guys. You guys have really kind of invigorated me in so many ways. So thank you guys.
Perfect. Thank you, Franklin. We'll see ya.
Take care, guys. Have a good night.